Hello, as I promised before, today we will be reviewing KZ ASX, second of two multi-balanced armature models announced by KZ. I already reviewed ASF, and in that review I mentioned that both models received controversial opinions, while professional reviewers dislike this model and regular buyers often do like them. Think that KZ still continue applying their own approach to the tuning, and they once again created models that definitely not fitting audiophilic criteria, like natural sound or slightly V-shaped but still leaning towards natural sound, 100% correct tonal representation, and so on and so forth. No, as it was done for ASF, ASX is also not natural, but actually now competition is more stiff because their price is $100. In each earpiece of these earphones they used 10 balanced armatures with sophisticated internal acoustic structure to apply the correct mixing of sound waves from different drivers, and they also use improved crossover tuning, but what it gives to regular listener. Of course, having 10 balanced armatures, they could probably create some top-of-the-line sound or something high-end. Like many companies use like 5-7 drivers in the $1,000+ earphones, but KZ decided that they will do more affordable model. Its price is $100, and it can be obtained with some discounts sometimes. I will add links to the AliExpress shop where I got them to the description, and probably let's proceed to the review. So, box is simple, it's black, small, and inside we will get earpieces themselves, short manual and warranty card, cable, and 2 pair of additional tips. As I've said before and will repeat in many other reviews, of course if situation won't change, KZ should start putting at least more tips to the accessory set, because it's a normal situation to have more tips even in the affordable segments, and $100 it's kind of closer to middle segment. But anyway, let's go back to the earpieces themselves. They using new bigger shells with updated shape, so probably fit could be worse comparing with their previous models. It's closer to traditional universal versions of custom in-ear monitors, but I don't have any issues with fit. To my ears they fitting absolutely effortless and giving me pretty comfortable wearing and slightly above average sound isolation. You can see that here used their new technologies of creating faceplates. There are few vent holes here, and in the lower part it looks like vent hole, but maybe it's just a screw. So anyway, sound isolation is above average, and here is spout. It has proper angle and goes nicely to ear channel, well, at least to my ears. There is a lip for holding the tips and protective grill, so no derbies will get inside of the shell. They once again used another tips with shorter stems. I actually not huge fan of this change because I like tips with full-size stems, and they are made of softer silicone than before, so it requires changing my habits, because in the past I used the biggest tips by KZ, but softer tips always getting stiff in my ears, and usually medium tips fitting better. You can experiment with third-party tips like SpinFit's CP100 or some others to get different fit and change the sound. You can see partially the internal structure. Here is some big driver, smaller one, and few additional drivers here, but bigger, and some driver assembly here. But bigger part is occupied with this white plastic thing, and that's the 3D printed acoustic equalization schema, some crossover here, and wiring, so pretty complicated internal design. They spend, lot of time creating some sound for these earphones. It's not like they get a bunch of drivers and throw it inside, but still, the result isn't what one can expect. Cables are made replaceable. As usual, they're using these 2-pin connectors with slightly recessed pins. I still think that it's probably the best option in the budget price segment in terms of durability and connection quality. Stock cable is normal. It has ear hooks without memory wires, so you can't bend it, but still holding the cable well. And also here used updated version of the cable. Probably that brownish KZ cable is gone in the past. It's fairly basic, but it's soft, slightly softer than average, zero microphonic effect, and pretty comfortable in wearing, not getting hard when it's cold outside. Here is splitter and jacks, also made of transparent plastic, so it's same press forms used here, but with different color. So basically stock cable is nice, looking attractive, and nothing audiophilic, but in this price segment I think it's okay cable. So to summarize this part, a bit greedy set of accessories, normal packaging, pretty stylish and efficient design, but of course fit could be a bit worse due to bigger size of the shells. And of course about the sound, it's the most interesting part, and I'm pretty sure that big part of audience jumped here, skipping all the previous part of the review, and maybe if you'd like some conclusions, you can simply jump to the end of this video, where I will try to summarize my thoughts. But anyway, here I'd like to speak about them in more details, because I need to make this video at least 20 minutes to annoy everyone with this background music. So let's have a player on the table, and let's talk about the sound. Today it will be Fio's M15. It's just for the illustration purposes, because actually, for these earphones it's better to get something more natural and more focused on the micro contrast and maybe a bit brighter. So, if I'd like to get more cheap hype, I could name this review something like absolute fail, avoid them at any cost, never buy, throw them away, these earphones give me chicken pox, and so on. But I'm trying to avoid that, and even if these earphones doesn't fit my subjective criteria, I'm trying to analyze whom are they made for. And they not matching my tastes, and they won't match tastes of the typical audiophiles who look for 100% correct timbres, for absolutely realistic instruments representation, for more or less natural signature, for monitoring sound. No, it's not the model for you if you'd like such sound, so you can stop watching this review here. I already say the most important thing. And for those who didn't close the tab with this video, let's try to speak about it. I am always trying to understand for whom this model is made for, who could like it, and you know what is more important here for me. I read the Pairings thread dedicated to these models, and quite a lot of people like their sound, so for me it's a sign that actually this model has its audience that could like it. But who are those people? So let's proceed with step-by-step description. Bass here is hugely accented. You know, in terms of frequency response, this model is pretty close to ASF, with some minor difference in the treble area, but in practice sound is pretty different, and that's why I'm always saying that just frequency response is not enough to explain and to understand the sound of the model. So bass here is also accented, but the difference, most noticeable difference between ASF and ASX, it's mids, because here mids are much more warmer with more weight, and that gives, you know, a different perception. ASF can be treated like more or less regular V-shaped monitors with big bass, then recessed mids, but thanks to the balanced armatures and slight focus on their resolution, they are not the most resolving model ever, of course, and not the most resolving model in that price range, but still, thanks to the balanced armatures mids, they are noticeable and present. This model is more warmer, and here it sounds more like bass is bleeding onto mids and giving them more warmth, and giving them a bit more highlighting. Main accent is done on the mid bass and upper bass, but deeper layers of bass are present, but because of the big mid bass accent, deeper bass is not as prominent and as noticeable as in some other models, but still it's present. Depth is not maximum, but still more or less good. Resolution of low frequencies is normal, but lacking that speed and that dry sense of dry low frequencies that is typical for balanced armatures. You know, it's kind of paradox in KZ tuning, because some of their hybrid models like ZSX, for example, have a bit faster bass comparing with balanced armature model, but taking the amount of lows here into account, it's pretty expectable. So this could be a good model for the bass heads, for those who like accented lows, but with slightly elevated treble, but still bass is dominating in the tuning of this model. I'm not a bass head, so it's definitely not my type of tuning. I prefer less of low frequencies. It's sounding really good with electronic music, but with acoustic instruments, with something like double bass, such instruments sounding exaggerated in terms of size, and they sounding bigger than they are in real life, and it means they are not natural, but actually it's expectable for such a tuning. And as an example of low frequencies, I've got Juno Reactor, Alien, pretty good electronic music with nice deep bass, with good bass line, pretty engaging, and this model represents it pretty well. Speaking about the mids, it could be divided into two parts. Lower part of mids sounding noticeably rolled off and smoothed, and actually male vocals receive a bit of added weight, and they lose a bit of sharpness and emotions. And you know, here this effect is more noticeable than in ASF. But at the same time, with some tracks with some low male, so with higher male vocals it's sounding less natural, with lower male vocals it's sounding a bit more natural, a bit more velvet-like, a bit smoother and more highlighted. So it depends on type of vocals you prefer. This additional warmth means less critical approach to the quality of records, more forgiving in terms of some issues with record, but at the same time I don't, this model doesn't sound even close to the balanced armatures. Maybe for some it could be plus, for others it will be kind of minus. Of course, if you looking for some superb resolution, that's not the model that will give you. But still, they are not as warm as they could be, and they are not as warm as some bass-heavy, inexpensive dynamic driver models that could be met in the below $100 segment. Imaginary stage is more on the intimate side, at least for me, because for me warmer earphones having smaller stage, so don't expect them to be super spacious or super three-dimensional positioning, but still more or less normal layering and instrument separation is present here, mainly because of the slightly accented upper mids and lower treble. And as an example, I've selected track that definitely shows that mids. It's Nazareth, Hair of the Dog, and of course Nazareth is probably first of all well known for their vocalist and his specific manner of singing, and actually with these earphones he's sounding much warmer than it should be, giving like sense of that it's someone else singing. But thanks to the accent on the upper mids, guitars and some cymbals sounding normal. And actually forgot to mention, if you like to have a bit more presence on the mids, you definitely can try some third-party tips. For example, I've got good results with SpinFit's CP100, but of course it depends on ears, because we all have different ears, so it could be different for you. And treble here is accented, but actually accent is not big enough to compensate these lower frequencies, and probably it's a good thing, because otherwise treble could become even more harsh and more fatiguing. But here actually I'd probably call treble comfortable, at least for me, despite of the noticeable spike. This treble is hidden by the warmth of lower part of sonic spectrum and sounding more or less comfortable for me. Extension is slightly below average, so don't expect some rich layering or some superb overtone saturation. And as an example, yet another track to demonstrate not the strongest part, but probably the weakest part here. It's Rush YYZ, and you know that this track, it's basically all about percussion and bell, this tiny bells at the beginning. Actually it's not bells, probably it's some other type of percussion instrument, but I don't know their names, and they sounding pretty nicely. But when Neil Peart switches to other cymbals, you will understand that they lacking treble extension to represent them correctly, and they sounding a bit moved to the background and actually quieter than they should be. And I don't know, in terms of pairing, they could be used with smartphones, with some entry-level dubs. Of course, they don't require something super natural, super resolving. Of course, it's better to avoid some warm sources, something with highlighted bass, because it will veil them even bit more. And I won't do any comparisons, you know, because it's just huge V-shaped signature with accented low frequencies, and the only thing I want to say here is basically comparison with ASF. And for me it's a bit subjective, but you know, I think that ASF gives a better price to quality ratio, not only because they are noticeably cheaper, but also because they, like, you know, have a bit more traditional tuning. Not nowadays, of course, they also have a big bass dominating over mids, but their mids are thinner and being a bit more resolving and giving more sense of mids presence, and they have a bit worse treble ASF, but you know, in this price tier, I don't think that it's a huge gain for the ASX. So I can't say that ASX is absolutely bad. They have some positive sides. They definitely have the persons that will like them. If you like warmer weighty mids, if you like big bass, and if you like comfortable treble, it could be a model for you. But you know, definitely I recommend you to listen them before buying, and that's what I can say about them. So thank you for listening, thank you for your attention, and have a nice day.